I had barely touched the back of my chair when Rebecca's heel kicked it hard, knocking it out from under me. "Go help in the kitchen," she sneered. "Adopted kids don't sit with the real family." Forks hovered midair. Then the laughter started. Cold, sharp, and meant to wound. I didn't shed a tear. I didn't say a word. Instead, I calmly picked up my purse, took out the thick envelope I'd been keeping hidden for weeks, and set it right in the middle of the dining table. "Mom and Dad left this to me," I said quietly. "Call your attorneys. We'll settle everything tomorrow." The way every smile instantly vanished. That wasn't even close to the real beginning. Hi, I'm Layla Morgan. And for most of my life, I tried to pretend that being the adopted kid in the Morgan household didn't make a difference. Harold and Miriam, my parents, never treated me as anything but theirs, but their biological children. Rebecca, Ethan, and Natalie constantly reminded me exactly where they believed I belonged. Childhood was filled with tiny stings. During family pictures, Rebecca, the oldest, would subtly shift her body so I barely made it into the frame. Ethan, my brother, would chuckle and say, "Relax, Isla. It's not like anyone can tell you don't match the rest of us." Natalie, the middle sister, mastered that gentle, fake smile people use when they're being awful but want to look innocent. And every time it happened, Mom would take me aside afterward, cup my cheeks softly, and whisper, "You are our daughter in every way that counts." Dad would tousle my hair, sit with me over homework, cheer for me at every recital and school event, like I was the most important person in his universe. Their love had always been steady and true. My one anchor in that house, the only place where I ever felt like I truly belonged. But then came the 6 months that shattered me from the inside out. When both Mom and Dad fell ill, I packed up and moved into their home without a second thought. I curled up on rigid hospital chairs, handled waves of paperwork, spoke to doctors daily, while my brothers and sisters sent the occasional lukewarm text. Adrian, my husband, stayed home with Ava and Mason, telling me, "Do whatever you need. I've got us covered." I'll never forget that. Ethan claimed he couldn't risk catching anything because of his banking career. Natalie insisted the twins needed her full time. Rebecca said she couldn't bear seeing them like that. So it was only me, every single day, brushing Mom's hair when her arms were too weak to lift, murmuring to Dad that things would be all right, even though I already knew the truth, clutching their hands as they slipped away, only days apart. Then came the funerals, where suddenly my siblings transformed into picture-perfect children of grief. And shortly after, they dropped a bombshell. Rebecca, with that perfectly poised voice of hers, announced she wanted to host a family dinner to honor Mom and Dad. She even started assigning roles. "Isla, you can manage the cooking. You always made Mom's dishes the best." Ethan nodded along like he was in a board meeting. Natalie chimed in, "And bring those bakery rolls your place sells." Mom adored them. I should have recognized the setup. The quiet whispers whenever I walked into a room. The way they treated me like hired help, not blood. How they dodged direct answers when I asked what the dinner was really for. But grief makes fools of us. It makes us believe in things we shouldn't. So I spent 3 long days preparing all of Mom's favorite recipes. Bought a bottle of wine that stretched my wallet too far. Put on the dress Mom always said lit up my smile. I convinced myself this dinner might mend us, that loss might smooth the jagged edges between us. But the second I stepped inside Rebecca's house, flawless, pristine, cold, something inside me tightened, a shift in the air, a polite tension that said I wasn't being welcomed. I was being cornered. As I walked deeper inside, a strange hush clung to the room, as if conversations had died the moment they heard the door. The dining table was already prepared with Mom's old china. The set Rebecca had to keep, she said, for sentimental reasons, though she barely showed up in those final months. Candles glowed. Soft music floated. Everything staged to perfection. Too perfect. "You're early," Rebecca said, smoothing her blouse as she approached. Her smile looked stretched tight, rehearsed. "I thought I'd help with the setup," I offered. "You've already done more than enough," she replied, her eyes sliding toward the containers I carried. "Just drop everything in the kitchen. We'll take it from here. We, not you, not family, them." While I walked by the dining room, I caught fragments of hushed voices. They cut off fast. Ethan's voice first, then Natalie's, followed by a silence so heavy it felt like a wall. When they stepped back into view moments later, their faces were too composed, too effortlessly casual. Something was off. I kept replaying the moment I showed up. Ethan barely spared me a glance before turning away. Natalie's fingers twisted around her bracelet. Rebecca kept darting glances between her siblings like she was silently confirming some plan. But a plan for what? In the kitchen, as I unpacked the dishes I had spent hours making, that familiar pressure returned in my chest. The same one I'd carried my whole childhood. Standing outside locked doors, hearing laughter from rooms I wasn't welcome in, scrolling through pictures of holiday traditions that kept happening without the adopted one. Exclusion can be so soft you doubt yourself. Other times, it walks right up to you with a grin. As I arranged portions of Mom's apple cinnamon roast onto a platter, a memory hit so sharply I could taste the cinnamon from that summer long ago. I was 11, holding a tray of cookies I'd baked alone. Rebecca, Ethan, and Natalie sat on the porch soaking up the evening. I asked if they wanted one. They traded looks. Rebecca said, okay. But the moment I turned away, I heard her whisper, she tries way too hard. And they laughed, just like they laughed tonight. Back here, in the present, I glanced at the clock. 15 minutes until dinner. I smoothed my hands against my dress, inhaled deeply, and walked into the living room where everyone had gathered. Rebecca and Natalie stood by the window, whispering. When they spotted me, their words vanished. Ethan fussed with his sleeves, eyes fixed anywhere but mine, like shame itself was bending him downward. I attempted to cut through the tension. I also brought Mom's apple pie, the one she taught me. Rebecca's smile sliced through my sentence. Perfect. You can serve it later. Serve it, not share it. Serve it. The tone, the posture, the deliberate courtesy, all of it was theater. Like they were waiting for the exact moment to reveal whatever they'd been plotting. Ava and Mason weren't here to fill the air with noise. Adrian wasn't here to hold my hand and tell me I'd be okay. It was only me, surrounded by people who had perfected the skill of making me feel like a stranger without ever saying it aloud. I reminded myself why I came. Because I needed to believe in family again. Because I hoped loss might soften their edges. Because I had spent 6 exhausting months pouring everything into caring for Mom and Dad in their final days. And maybe, just maybe, that meant something to them. But when I sat down, slowly, quietly, I caught Rebecca watching me. Not with love, not like a sister, but like someone checking a trap she'd just set. That's when I knew. Whatever was coming wasn't mercy. Dinner began the way catastrophes usually do. Politely, calmly, everyone pretending nothing simmered beneath the surface. Rebecca slipped into the chair at the head of the table, the one Mom used to own, folding her napkin with practiced arrogance. Ethan poured the wine with the precision of someone running a corporate event, not attending a family memorial. Natalie kept smoothing the fabric of her dress, eyes darting around as if she were waiting for some unspoken cue. I sat at the far end of the table, the seat deliberately left empty after they had taken their places. I tried to ignore it. I tried to steady my breathing. For the first 10 minutes, the chatter felt innocuous. Ethan spoke about work. Natalie rattled on about her twins. Rebecca reminisced about Mom's garden, conveniently omitting the fact she never actually watered it. But nothing in that room felt genuine. Every smile seemed strained. Every anecdote felt memorized. I brought out the dishes I had spent days preparing. Mom's favorite recipes. And Rebecca clapped lightly. Oh, good, Isla. You can start serving. Serving? Not sitting down with us. I swallowed the jab, naturally. As I moved along the table, I noticed something. Not one of them made room for me. No chairs were shifted. No hands reached out to help. I placed the plates before them while they continued their conversations, as if I were hired staff, as if this dinner weren't supposed to honor the people who loved me most. Midway through the meal, Ethan cleared his throat in that familiar, condescending way from high school. Since we're all here, he began, maybe we should talk about the house. Rebecca nodded. And Mom's jewelry. Some pieces are quite valuable. We should plan accordingly. Natalie added smoothly, and the investments. Best if they stay in the bloodline. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. The bloodline. They spoke it plainly, without guilt or hesitation, as if it were an unchangeable fact. Rebecca leaned forward, her voice dipped in saccharine sweetness. We're just being practical, Isla. I'm sure you understand. In that moment, I understood plenty. The smiles had been bait. The small talk a setup. The dinner a stage. I put my fork down. What exactly are you saying? Natalie inhaled slowly, preparing her rehearsed, sympathetic tone. We all know how much Mom and Dad loved you, Isla. But legally, well, inheritance typically goes to biological children. It's just how families work. Families? I asked, incredulous. Ethan nodded. We're not cutting you out. We're just saying the majority should stay where it belongs. Belongs? The room seemed to tilt. Something inside me, my last fragile hope, snapped cleanly in two. You're serious, I whispered. Rebecca tilted her head, that old childhood smirk creeping back. Don't be dramatic. You can keep sentimental things. A photo or two. But the house, the accounts, it's only fair. And that was it. A quiet, sharp stillness settled in my chest. A clarity I hadn't felt before. I pushed my chair back gently. Ethan raised an eyebrow, confused. Natalie bit her lip. Rebecca's smirk wavered just slightly. I stood and walked toward the kitchen. They probably expected tears, retreat, or a quiet disappearance. The patterns they drilled into me for years. Instead, I reached for my purse, slid my hand inside, and closed my fingers around the thick envelope. Mom had pressed it into my hand days before she slipped into unconsciousness. Dad had signed it with trembling hands, and I'd carried it for weeks, waiting for the moment they revealed their true selves. I turned back to the dining room with a calm I barely recognized. Rebecca frowned. Isla, where are you? I didn't answer. I stepped to the center of the table, where Mom's fine china sat, and placed the envelope down with a soft, deliberate thud. The sound cut through the room like a blade. What's that? Ethan's voice tightened. I met each of their eyes. Mom and Dad left me this letter. I said, call your lawyers. We'll meet tomorrow. Silence hung in the air. For a fleeting moment, no one dared to breathe. Then it came. The thing I hadn't realized I'd been waiting for. Panic. Raw. Unfiltered. Irresistible. Ethan's face went pale. Natalie's fingers tightened around her wine glass as if it might slip. Rebecca's smile froze, then shattered. Lila, she murmured. What did you do? I leaned forward slightly. What you made me do? Without another word, I grabbed my purse and stepped out of the house, leaving their stunned silence behind, like smoke drifting from a fire I had finally ignited. The next morning, the city felt unnaturally bright. Too bright for the storm I knew was coming. Sleep had eluded me, my mind replaying every moment from last night. The laughter, the insult, the envelope slamming against the china, the way their faces had drained of color. Adrian drove me to the law office, his hand resting on mine the entire ride. You don't owe them anything, he said softly. I know, I whispered, but a small, stubborn part of me. Some quiet hope. Wish they had chosen differently. The law office sat on a calm downtown street, its tall windows catching the early sunlight. As we entered, my stomach tightened. This was the moment my parents had prepared me for, the one my siblings had acted like would never arrive. The receptionist led us to a long conference room, dark with table, leather chairs, a wall of framed degrees. Sitting there as if they owned the place were Rebecca, Ethan, and Natalie. Ethan's wife, Clara, the corporate law powerhouse, perched beside him in a suit that probably cost more than my car. Natalie's husband, Eric, had a stack of financial spreadsheets in front of him, tapping his pen nervously. Rebecca sat alone, hands clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. None of them looked at me. Moments later, Mr. Arthur Sullivan entered. Our parents' lawyer for over 20 years. Gray hair, calm voice, eyes that seemed to see far more than anyone wanted. He greeted Adrian before turning to me. Isla, your mother and father spoke very highly of you, especially toward the end. The words landed like a warm hand across my shoulder blades. I nodded, barely keeping my composure. Sullivan closed the door, took his seat at the head of the table, opened a thick folder, and the room sank into silence. We are here to review the last will and testament of Harold and Miriam Morgan. Rebecca straightened. Ethan folded his hands. Natalie pressed her lips together. Sullivan's gaze swept over them before he continued. I understand Isla presented a letter yesterday. Before we proceed, I want to clarify one thing. He reached into the folder and lifted a sealed document. Your parents wrote several private letters before they passed. The one Isla shared is genuine and matches the revisions they made 8 months ago, right around when their health began declining. Rebecca spoke first, her voice tight. Mr. Sullivan, our parents would never exclude any of us. There must be a mistake. There is no mistake, he said plainly. He opened the will. Every word hit like a thunderclap, the entirety of the Morgan estate. Homes, savings, investments, belongings, all insured assets, was to go to their daughter, Layla Morgan. You could have heard a pin drop. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to freeze. Sullivan continued reading the legal phrasing, but all I could register was the electricity in the room as every eye swung toward me. Not with patience, not with empathy, but with disbelief so intense it teetered on anger. Ethan was the first to snap. This is absurd, he barked. We're their children. They're biological children. They wouldn't just hand everything over. He cut himself off, yet the implication lingered. To her, to the adopted one. Clara leaned forward. We'd like to examine the medical records from the time these revisions were signed. There could have been diminished capacity. Sullivan raised a hand. Both Harold and Miriam were assessed and deemed competent by 2 physicians. Rebecca's voice broke. No, they wouldn't do this to us. They loved us. They loved all of you, Sullivan said gently. But they also told me something very specific. May I read it? He looked at me. I nodded. Sullivan unfolded a handwritten note from the file. Our children have grown into adults with their own lives, but Isla is the one who never left our side. Not from duty, but out of love. She cared for us when no one else would. We want to ensure she has the security she has always given us. Natalie buried her face in her hands. Ethan scoffed. So what? She takes care of them for a few months, and suddenly she gets everything? That's insane. I felt something harden inside me, a low, steady heat. 6 months, I said quietly. 6 months of hospitals, endless paperwork, and sleeping in chairs. Where were you? They had no answer. Sullivan continued. Your parents also included a clause regarding any challenges to the will. Ethan leaned forward. What clause? If any beneficiary attempts to contest it, they forfeit all claims to family photos, heirlooms, personal items, keepsakes, or sentimental belongings. Everything will instead be donated. Panic struck immediately. Rebecca gasped. They give away Mom's ring, Dad's medals? Yes, Sullivan confirmed. Natalie looked at me, eyes red. Isla, you wouldn't let that happen, right? We grew up together. I asked softly, did we? Because my memories of growing up with you are very different from yours. Ethan slammed his hand on the table. You can't shut us out. This is our legacy. Legacy. My voice stayed calm. You weren't there. Not once. You all had excuses while I watched them fade day after day. Eric spoke, quiet and almost apologetic. We're struggling financially, Isla. The mortgage. I shook my head. Don't put this on me. Clara leaned in, sharp. Legally, we can still argue undue influence. Sullivan closed the folder with a soft, decisive thud. You cannot claim undue influence when the beneficiary wasn't present for the revisions. Isla wasn't even in the building when these changes were made. The stunned look on their faces said everything. In that instant, the balance of power flipped. Rebecca's voice lowered to a fragile murmur. So, this is the end? No, I replied. This chapter is finished. What comes next is your decision. Natalie looked like she was clinging to hope. What do you expect from us? I paused. Really paused. I remembered the snide remarks, the cold shoulders, the way I was always treated like a temporary visitor instead of family. Their laughter last night. How they delighted in tearing me down. What I wanted wasn't complicated. I want peace, I told them at last. But I won't compromise what my parents wanted. They made their choice. And so have you. Ethan shot out of his chair. Fine, then we'll see if we have any legal options. Before he could continue, Sullivan interjected. There's one more thing. Your parents left a private message for you, Isla. He handed me a small envelope. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single sentence written in my mother's script. You were always ours. Now, let us care for you the way you cared for us. My throat tightened, eyes burning. For the first time since they were gone, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of their love. Not a responsibility, an inheritance. When I lifted my gaze, my siblings stared at me with a blend of bitterness, remorse, and fear. I rose from my seat. I'm finished here. I walked to the door, palm curling around the handle. Behind me, Rebecca's voice wavered. Ella, don't go, please. I paused, but kept my back to them. You told me to get back in the kitchen, I said quietly. But I'm done living on leftovers. Then I stepped out, leaving them exactly where they had tried to keep me my entire life. Behind me, Adrian was waiting in the car when I exited the attorney's office, and the second the door shut, the pressure I'd been holding inside finally broke. He took my hand without saying a word, and that simple gesture unraveled me completely. I leaned against him, letting the tears I'd been holding back around my siblings finally fall. That night, once Ava and Mason were asleep, I poured everything out to Adrian. Every detail of the will, every reaction, every desperate grab they made to reclaim something that wasn't theirs. He listened without interruption and finally said, They lost you long before they lost the inheritance. The days that followed were chaotic. Ethan called with threats. Natalie appeared twice, sobbing at my door. Rebecca sent flowers, cards, and long messages about misunderstandings and miscommunication. But I held my ground. For the first time ever, I didn't apologize. I didn't shrink. I forgive you, I told each of them. But forgiveness alone couldn't fix the damage they'd done. Weeks later, at a grocery store, I ran into Dana, the social worker who had supported my parents during their final months. She spoke of two little girls who'd lost everything. Sisters, ages 4 and 3, with no relatives willing to take them both. Something inside me stirred. 8 months later, Leah and Hazel came home. That first night, as I tucked them in, Ava reading to one, Mason offering his favorite stuffed bear, I realized I had finally created the family I had always deserved. A year after that fateful dinner, I stood in the doorway of our new home, watching all 4 children racing around the backyard. Ava's laughter rang sharp and clear. Mason played superhero. Little Leah and Hazel clutched handfuls of dandelions like precious treasures. Adrian slipped his arm around my waist. This, he whispered, is the real family. And he was right. Blood didn't give me this life. Love did. Choice did. Courage did. If you've ever been pushed aside by the people who were supposed to protect you, know you're not alone. Share your story below and subscribe so you never miss what comes next.